So Dan, thanks for taking the time with us again today.
Yeah, it's great to see you, Matt.
So another Fully Charged Live is upon us.
Yeah.
But interestingly, this weekend's event here at Farnborough is called Fully Charged Live South. So Dan, tell me what's been happening with the live events.
Not a lot. It's been very quiet. Not really. We're doing 6 this year. We did 3 last year, so it's a big step up. The team are still just about talking to me. But you know, from our perspective, we are very fortunate with having a YouTube channel to know broadly where our audience is. And so we have shows in North America, Australia, Europe now, and we actually started Fully Charged Live 5 years ago at Silverstone. And we decided we kind of ran out of space at Silverstone, so we decided to move it to Farnborough. And then the pandemic struck. And so on one hand, we had to wait quite a long time before we could do the first Farnborough show. But a lot of our audience in the Midlands and the North sort of cried foul and said, well, why are you going further south? You know, we really liked having the show at Silverstone at least. And we said, well, look, we've always wanted to do a south and north show, so we were going to do south one year and then north the next. So it's taken us a while because of the pandemic to get to the point we've been able to do that financially. So we're up in Farnborough for this weekend, and then we're in Harrogate in the third weekend of May. And then we have a little bit of downtime because we've already launched a show in Australia in March, and then we go into Canada and to California and to the Netherlands later this year as well. So it's been pretty busy, but from our perspective, we're very, very fortunate to have early mover advantage in terms of doing these kind of new motor shows, if you like, or home and motor shows. And so we were sort of really keen to sort of press home that advantage and crack on. Also, we're a very mission-driven business. We want people to stop burning stuff. For us, there's an urgency probably that our business has that maybe is kind of one of the reasons it's quite successful. It really means something to us.
I've seen today that there is a raft of new vehicle manufacturers attending this year. Some familiar, some brand new. Tell me what's happening in the EV market and who are these new kids on the block?
So it's been, I think you could have dismissed electric vehicles as kind of, a fad, or maybe something that would be relatively small beer back in the kind of the mid-teens. And then in 2016, Tesla launched the Model 3, launched it in March 2016, and they took a huge amount of orders there and then. And we said at this point, this is a kind of iPhone moment really for the industry. It won't be quite as instant as that because obviously it takes a lot longer to build a car. They're a lot bigger. There's a lot more stuff and infrastructure around them. But we felt that this was a big moment. And we were saying at that point, actually, I think if you're in the boardroom of a BMW or an Audi, you should be paying close attention to this because the Tesla Model 3 might actually give those kind of staples of the Audi A4 and the BMW 3 Series and so on a run for their money. And so what's happened, obviously, is that I think most car companies, legacy car companies, dismissed that. They thought Tesla was not going to be able to make those cars and Tesla was going to go bankrupt, and I think it came within a whisker of that. But once they got through production hell and they started to deliver Model 3s in 2018, that really kind of moved the needle. Obviously now, fast forwarding, they've got the Model Y as well, which I think is one of the best-selling cars in the world. And in the intervening period, then we've obviously seen some others come seriously to the plate, not least the Korean brands. So here we've got Hyundai, Genesis and Kia, but also obviously Chinese brands with European veneer. So you've got MG, who are owned by SAIC Motors, and you've got Polestar that are owned by Geely. And the sales figures sort of speak for themselves really, year on year. Across Europe, more and more of these cars are being sold, and so probably by the end of this year, 1 in 5 cars being sold in the UK will be pure electric. But what happened was, I think it became quite difficult for legacy car makers for a number of different reasons. They're already struggling as it was. Car sales have been depressed by the pandemic, and there's been chip shortages, and obviously there's been conflict and all these other issues. So as if that wasn't enough, they're having to deal with a paradigm shift to a new type of sort of motive force in electric cars, and some of them are behind the curve, and some of them aren't ready for this or as ready as they should be. And of course, nature abhors a vacuum. If there aren't affordable cars, someone's going to step in and provide them, and that's probably the single missing aspect, I think, is having more cars at the sort of 15, 20, 25,000 pound range. And you can see there's a very strong Asian influence now at this show. In particular, Chinese brands are now starting to export. It's the biggest electric car market in the world, and they're actually in a position to mass manufacture electric cars. Actually, the cars are very high quality, and they're now bringing them to Europe. And they were going to bring them to the US, but Joe Biden's Inflation Reduction Act actually mandates that they've got to build a certain percentage of the cars in America. So at the back end of last year, we were getting strong signals that the Chinese brands would come to our Amsterdam show this year, and that's happening. We may have as many as 10 Chinese brands at our Amsterdam show this year. Right, yeah. But when Biden sort of announced the Inflation Reduction Act, we then got quite a few of them reach out and actually say, well, we can't go into the US as quickly as we thought. And the UK was obviously in sort of second or third place because it's quite a big car market. Yeah. So this year we have MG and Polestar, but we also have GWM Aura, who've been here before, and then the brand new one is BYD. And BYD are the biggest manufacturer of plug-in hybrids and battery electric vehicles. Pure battery electric vehicles, they're behind Tesla. So Tesla should do 1.8 to 2 million electric vehicle sales this year. BYD will probably do about 1.2 million. But we did a session earlier called which car companies will end up in an electric graveyard, and at the end I said, well, which car companies are going to be the biggest car companies in the world by 2030? And consistently people were saying BYD and Tesla, and I think that's probably right. So it's an incredible new world order coming, and it's an incredible kind of changing of the guard, and we would love to see all the car companies survive, but it does seem like that's probably not going to happen.
Do you think that the Chinese might likely win, or like you say, because of the supply chain issues that currently exist, where people are waiting quite a long while for a vehicle from order, where
loyalty has never been so fluid. There's a huge amount of conquests now. For Kia, for example, are conquesting very highly against the German cars. People are getting into the lovely Kia EV6 and things like that. So at the moment, brand loyalty is as fluid as it's ever been. That will probably crystallize again in 5-10 years once people get used to a certain brands and the market settles down again. So there's a huge opportunity. But yeah, we do think it's hard to be precise, but it certainly feels like Tesla, BYD, and some of the other Chinese brands will have a very significant chunk of the market. I mean, I'd be speculating it could be 20%, but it could be quite a bit more than that. And that obviously has got to come from somewhere else, right?
Yes, of course.
And that's the reality. We probably should have a world with fewer cars, in fact. So it is. We did the session earlier. I said it's a sort of consequential game of musical chairs. We get to the end of the decade, and there's going to be a couple of chairs missing, I think.
What do you think the current energy price crisis is doing or to a group of industries that rely on that electricity?
Yeah, I mean, so the UK energy prices are the highest, I think, pretty much in the world. Obviously, it's not purely a UK issue, but obviously the UK has a few different issues that are kind of reinforcing each other. It's been a kind of long, difficult winter for most people. I think we've all felt the cost of living rise, and that is in no small part
everywhere.
There's no small part to energy, right? And just little things like, I don't know, growing tomatoes and having to keep them warm is, costing people more, or everything's costing people more to do. So
producing paper products, which takes energy,
everything.
etc.
So it's been a long kind of difficult winter in that respect. We've seen the sort of sales of solar and batteries and things like that actually grow very, very quickly as people want to have more energy independence and almost kind of remove themselves from the future volatility of fossil fuels. So that's held up pretty well, and the electric vehicle market is still growing, but it's plateaued a little bit in the UK. But I think that is almost entirely down to that kind of cost of living crisis, because it's still growing fast on mainland Europe, where the energy price rises aren't quite as stark. So yeah, it's an interesting time. But yeah, from our perspective, we were actually very concerned about if you have a civilized society which is choosing between heating and eating, obviously that's
it's a pretty grim.
It's grim, right?
Life.
Yeah.
To be leading.
For us, for our show, we want to be able to talk about energy saving and energy efficiency, and there's a session at the moment called Home Energy Hacks.
Yeah.
We want to be able to offer people second-hand electric vehicles or opportunities to maybe go down to one car and maybe get into micromobility, more shareable options, all those sorts of things. So we're very mindful of that.
I think that the car sharing side is something that still needs time, but that would appear to be a solution to a myriad of issues where people's cars are sitting doing nothing for the majority of their life, where they could be shared amongst several people.
I think so. And then we just ran a session on vehicle to grid, and we think cars and the batteries within those cars can be seen as assets, and therefore much the way you would look at an asset if you were running a fleet, and you'd want that vehicle to be out on the road as much as possible. Maybe with some shared private ownership, maybe again if someone's overseeing that, they might want that vehicle to be used as much as possible, right? So I do autonomous is a subject that comes up a lot, and I'm not against it, but I think that shared is a more you get a more near term.
I think one could lead to the other,
quite possibly,
which is the perfect situation, isn't it? Where you're hailing a vehicle for use specifically. So what do you think was a sticky question? What do you think our governments could be doing more to encourage and assist people to enter the EV and home energy markets? Because obviously there is a price entry point still, isn't there? There isn't that magic vehicle yet, which is a budget vehicle.
No, I mean I think
and the same with regard to entering home. Alternative energy at home, again the entry point is high.
We don't pull any punches on the fully charged, so we're complete independent. So I can say without fear or favour that as far as I'm concerned, the biggest thing the government could do is stand aside for a new government. But if I was going to be practical about what could be done, there are levers that they can pull in terms of alternative energy and home energy. There is actually a £5,000 grant for heat pumps, but you've got to tell people about it, and you've got to tell the right people,
and stop pulling incentives from under people,
and also
stop
creating incentives that installers kind of just about get their heads around, and then you take that away from them. So the heat pump grant has actually been extended recently, but I would say not many people know about it, and so we said to UK government, come to this show for free to talk about the heat pump grant, and they declined. So to
Any particular reason?
Apathy. I don't know. But then meanwhile, there are headlines in the newspapers which say heat pump demand is weak. No, if you come to our show, we could have probably filled that grant allocation up for you.
It's all about education, informing people, and there's not enough information out there. And because there's not enough information out there, there's a lot of misinformation. So you always people talk about don't buy these cars because their build quality is bad. There's the range isn't what they say it is. All of those kind of things, and of course the price to charge.
So on the subject, same question, but the answer for vehicles really. I mean, I think that the market has started to hint at cheaper cars. So we've unveiled the BYD Dolphin here today, which is a bit cheaper. The BYD's next car, which is the Seagull, not totally convinced by the naming, but at the same time, it's good to have something a bit different.
Of course.
The Seagull is going to be that bit cheaper. That's going to be kind of a more entry-level car. It's like $8,000 in equivalent of $8,000 in China. I'm not sure it's going to be quite as cheap as that when it comes to Britain, but nonetheless, if you had a car at £12,000-15,000 that's a half-decent electric car, that will make quite a big difference, I think. So I think that's the market is kind of helping that a little bit, but there have been grants for electric cars that have been kind of lowered, and there have been things with charges that have kind of been taken away and things like that. And if a serious government probably would still be doing some of those subsidies, I think.
Finally, what are your hopes for 2035?
Still be alive.
Do you think it's still achievable, or it will happen, or is there going to be some pushback?
For what, for electric vehicles or climate change or
electric
what?
vehicles for the effective ban of sale of new.
No, I
diesel.
think so. Norway at the moment is well over 80% of new car sales are battery electric vehicles. They were at the same level we're at now, which is about 17%. They were at that level 5 years ago. So we think by the end of this decade, we think largely people will be choosing electric vehicles, because I think a bit like smoking or something like that, it becomes less fashionable to buy a combustion engine vehicle. There will, of course, be people who will buy a diesel engine car 1 minute to midnight before the ZEV mandate kicks in, just to stick it to the man. Of course, that's going to happen.
Of course, yes.
But
there's people that are absolutely dedicated to having a internal combustion engine under their bonnet.
But we think actually these cars are so good that the network effect kicks in, and once your brother's got one and your neighbour's got one, and it becomes much more common. You start to realise actually how bad can they be? People who are driving them seem to be smiling an awful lot.
Exactly.
So
I have to be honest. I drove a Model Y today, and it was quite a pleasurable experience.
Yeah. They're really, they're genuinely. I'm not paid by a car company.
No.
They're better.
They are
better,
yeah,
and that's the reality. So all you really need to do is encourage people to come to something like Fully Charged Line and test drive a couple.
Yeah.
Then they probably invest in one, and then they never. Well, on our surveys, 99% of people never want to go back.
No.
So it's. I think it will happen. I am actually optimistic on that. If you ask me about broader subjects like, well, we've done enough to. No, air pollution and climate change, I'm not sure I'd be quite as positive, but I think that the EV thing is going to happen. I also think it inspires a lot of better behaviour. The typical journey we see is a person buys an EV, they get a charge point installed, then they change their energy tariff, then they think, well, maybe I could generate or store my own power, and that leads them into other things. So actually, as a kind of a halo technology which excites people about the whole sustainability piece, they're really, really powerful, because people still get so emotive about cars. So we're trying to use that to our advantage.
I think you are.
We're getting
Dan,
there.
Thanks again for your time today. I know you've been very busy. I hope the rest of the weekend goes well, and good luck for the timetable for the coming year.
My pleasure.
I hope you see you next year.
Yeah, definitely.